I can't make up a problem that doesn't seem to be there. I've issued invitations to anyone to come forward, but so few people have actually done so. Now, you could investigate as to why. Now, as far as I'm concerned, it's because they don't have symptoms that can be put together as this form of desert storm syndrome.
The guys who were sat here today went to the Gulf to fight a war. They all knew the possibility of them being killed was there, but none of them knew the possibility of them coming back with this illness was there.
My symptoms since the Gulf War are severe short-term memory loss, which upsets me very much. Very high blood pressure, hair loss, weak bladder, pins and needles in the end of my left hand and my legs.
I lived on the top floor. I used to run up there all the time. As soon as I come back, I noticed I wasn't running up there. I was looking at the stairs and thinking, you know, I'm too tired.
I was taken to an army military hospital in London, where I was in a psychiatric unit for a week. I was told that I had been telling a lot of lies, there was nothing wrong with me, and under no circumstances was I staying in the Territorial Army.
I was actually discharged from the Army 2 years ago, psychiatric problems for depression, suicide attempts, and just heightened anger. I've had weight loss, I've lost about 1.5 stone now. I go to the toilet at least 7 times a day.
I've lost about 4.5 stone. I've been to my local GP, he's taking blood tests. He can't understand it, but it's bugging him as well as me.
I had severe chest pains, couldn't walk to the end of the street without actually having to stop and hold my chest. I'd like, you know, the government to recognise it so we can get some help, because now we're starting to get deaths from this.
Finally, the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans Affairs has recognized that a lot of returning Persian Gulf veterans are experiencing unexplained medical problems. Some have called it the Persian Gulf Syndrome, some have called it the Gulf War sickness, some of them call it the mystery illness. Whatever they want to call it, the soldiers are sick, and there's no ready explanation for what is causing their medical problems.
40,000 American Gulf War veterans are registered sick. As British troops campaign to have symptoms investigated, evidence from the USA links Desert Storm with birth defects. The MOD denial of the illness leaves sufferers undiagnosed and untreated. In the USA, one doctor has successfully treated sick veterans. We take a British Gulf War sufferer to him for diagnosis and treatment, with dramatic results. The so-called clean war was fought under a barrage of toxic pollutants that now look likely to have caused damage to the immune and nervous systems. The unprecedented exposure to a cocktail of local bacteria, chemical warfare agents, unlicensed nerve tablets and pesticides leaves little mystery behind the illnesses. 3 years later, as families and veterans fight for answers, we ask, is the government refusal to hold an inquiry into Gulf War sickness an admission it has poisoned its own side?
When the war started, Iraqis invaded Kuwait, they called us up. We were there, no problems. We were keen and eager to go. 3 years on, I mean, all we want is an explanation.
Their response has just been to, you know, to remove us from the military and the problem will go away.
I don't want any more children. I mean, I would have wanted more children if I could have had some answers.
I was threatened by the uniformed personnel on my base and from command headquarters that if I opened my mouth to anybody about what was wrong with me, they would ensure that I never worked again as a doctor.
Somebody in Whitehall must know this problem exists, and they're just denying it. And it makes me feel sick knowing this, that we're trying to get ourselves better. We want some answers, and they're not giving it to us. I joined up in January 1978, and I served in Germany, went to Northern Ireland, served in the Falklands. It's one big happy family, really, and I got a great satisfaction out of it.
Well, before he went away, he was a totally different person. He had bags of energy. He'd be able to go out, he'd play football, we'd be able to go shopping, he'd walk miles. He came back and he's slowly gone downhill. He's had chest infections, skin rashes, His spine's played up, and as the months went on, I just noticed his heightened aggression. One night he actually tried to strangle me in bed.
I've got short-term memory loss. My memory's not all that good anymore. Sometimes I forget my wife's name. I get crippling stomach pains. I'm constantly going to the toilet with diarrhoea. And I've got a lump on the side of my body, which is like a tennis ball. I went sick while I was in the army, and I explained, I said I was getting a bit worried about it, and the doctor said it's normal, it's just puppy fat. What I would like is something to be done about it. I mean, it's getting bigger all the time. People keep writing in the BMJ, British Medical Journal, saying that the illnesses don't exist, and the local GPs read this and they just totally ignore you.
They delivered her onto me, and then they straight away took her away before I could see her. And they said to me, oh, she's got something wrong with her ears. There's pieces missing. So I said, oh, that doesn't matter. But it wasn't pieces missing. She actually hadn't got any proper ears. She's just got pieces of skin, and she's got no ear canals.
From the military system, it's been very poor. We've not been given any help at all. We weren't given any answers. We weren't told, you know, it was or it wasn't. We haven't been able to find out any reasons.
When I asked to take her out of the military system, they weren't happy at all. They said no, I couldn't do that. But I told my husband to go away because he was the military connection, and I told the doctor that I wasn't in the army, nor was my baby, and I left for England.
Recently, the geneticists have not helped us at all. They've basically said that, as far as we're concerned, that, you know, the military side of it didn't cause any of Heather's problems. We've not been given any reasons why or why not. There've not been any testing as such.
My husband had told them about he'd been in the Gulf, and anything he'd been given there, he didn't know if it would affect it. We didn't know, you know. We wasn't saying that was it, but we just wanted it to be ruled out. They said they'd contacted the MOD, and they'd been told they couldn't have any information regarding that. So, as far as they were concerned, it wasn't involved, and that was it.
The Allens now feel able to pursue their case. Paul has left the army. There are many other reports from soldiers of birth defects after the Gulf War, but the official denials make it impossible to convince geneticists that research is needed on the Gulf War link. In one unit from Mississippi, 13 out of 16 babies born to Gulf War veterans had birth defects.
I don't know if it was gases or whatever. I think it was something in the air, or maybe something that, you know, they gave them. But whatever it is, it's inside of him. And I don't know if they can, you know, I don't know if he's going to ever, you know, get well from this. And I'm just not going to chance having another baby. No way.
Our husbands were in the same unit, and each one of us has a sick child, and it's just not like a summer cold these kids have. It's constant.
Really makes you scared. You think about any babies in the future, you know, and we just want to be heard.
In the US, the political strength of veterans groups forced senators to hold hearings to investigate Gulf War sickness. The Freedom of Information Act there has helped veterans in gaining evidence to build their case.
I feel as though that we are young people trapped in the body of elderly people. I'm very upset at the possibility of my son's condition being related to both my husband and my service in Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I feel it is the obligation of our United States government to investigate these claims and release all pertinent information to the veterans and the parents.
These people are fighting battles daily, and the sad part about it is there's casualties. There's probably more casualties now than when that war was actually being fought. And, you know, not only the men and women are dying, but these children are dying.
This young woman has turned around and just wouldn't take no for an answer, which is exactly what needed to be done. But we're really, in a lot of ways, we're late in doing what needs to be done, simply because a lot of the facts are going to be gone.
From the very beginning, the American Legion has asked for a complete epidemiological study of all those veterans that were involved in the Persian Gulf to try to isolate what is causing the medical conditions. Currently, there are 32 independent studies going on. Also, the House of Representatives has passed a piece of legislation which would put into law the fact that Persian Gulf veterans could be compensated without a diagnosis.
In Britain, diagnosis remains crucial. While the MOD maintain there is no scientific or medical evidence to suggest anyone is suffering from Gulf War sickness, service charities like the Army Benevolent Fund, SAFA and the Royal British Legion can continue to turn down applications. A support fund set up with public money in the wake of the war, the Gulf Trust, has been disbanded and more than £3 million has been absorbed into those same service charities.
I had to drop out of an ICFT, which is an infantry combat fitness test, because I was out of breath and I just couldn't go any further. I reported to the medical centre, and there was about 6 or 7 guys, exactly in the same position as I was. And the doctor seen me straight away, and we'll just give him some nasal drops and say, no, you've just got a blocked up nose now. I've got a kidney infection, chest problems, breathing problems, but I think the main problem is a skin problem. Just like spots all over your back and your lower body. And the doctor had a look at us, and he did say that it's a form of acne.
When I returned from the Gulf, it was about 10 months afterwards. We actually went to Canada, and I had the problem of vomiting in Canada, and I was actually sent off the exercise we were doing because it comes that bad. I was bringing up blood, everything. I couldn't eat nothing, I couldn't drink nothing, everything I'd done. I ended up being sick, and it was all put down to off the doctors. They says it was a volcanic dust which caused an infection. We were being on the prairies of Canada, but this was the same symptoms which I had been suffering prior. And then my legs, I started getting pain in my legs, and feeling very aggressive and bad temper, I had headaches. I was sweating, I couldn't really move fast. If I moved fast, I wanted to be sick or burst out into sweat.
I lost my eyesight, which I've regained some of it, but not all of it. I have pains in my legs, as if I've got pins and needles from my waist down. Aching joints, my back. I get pains in my back. And if I bang myself, I get scars all over my legs. There's no explanation whatsoever, no tests done or anything. Just go away, it'll be all right, or you'll get your sight back. Since that period of time now, I've had 7 pairs of spectacles. I was a practicing physical training instructor. I went on a promotions course and I failed a basic fitness test. So after that, I decided to terminate my service because I couldn't keep up physically. I was physically ruined.
The illness has occurred in units based throughout the country. In Newcastle, Eddie wrote to his local paper to see if there were any other sick soldiers in the region. A number of people contacted him, and they've been building a local campaign, advertising in the free papers and organising meetings at their homes.
And try and get the government to open their eyes, and basically until they do open their eyes, we're not going to stop recruiting.
I know from experience working in medical centres, a lot of people medically downgraded, they're on light duties, which means to a civilian they're on the sick.
To be an infantry soldier is the most demanding job in the British Army, and they're only young lads who are embarrassed to the fact they've got problems wrong with them and are too frightened to go with these problems.
The soldiers who've been discharged are prepared to talk, but of course any soldier who's still serving then suffers a great difficulty because he knows that under the various cuts that if he complains to the government or he complains to an opposition spokesman, he may be the next person to be given his cards.
In the last year, David Clark has consistently raised questions in Parliament to force the issue onto the political agenda.
The effect of depleted uranium. Now, all I say is that I don't think you've had a fair hearing. I don't think people have listened to you. There's a lot of evidence there, but what I believe is necessary is an inquiry in Britain along the lines of the American inquiry. One of the difficulties has been getting hold of the evidence because the Ministry of Defence put up the shutters and say, well, you really oughtn't to know about this because it's a military secret. And I think it's wrong that they obsessively hide behind secrecy. Of course I realise that the defence of the realm, protection against our enemies is vital, but you mustn't use that when you're actually talking about the rights of individuals?
There's no doubt that you just can't fight this sort of establishment on your own. They are much too powerful. They think they are all powerful. They certainly adopt that attitude, and at the first available opportunity they slap you down and they keep you there.
Vivian Lane trained as a doctor in the RAF and until 1991 had a successful career. Her interest in sport, competing internationally, won her a scholarship to study sports medicine outside the Air Force. She was working as a civilian GP at RAF Stafford during the Gulf War.
There were about 6 people who came back with all non-specific type illnesses. Naturally, because they were poorly, I investigated them in the usual fashion of a GP blood test, urine samples, etc. Nothing turned up that was anything remarkable or could specifically identify anything in particular.
And what happened to them? Were they sent off to other places to be investigated?
No, not at all. If they had recovered sufficiently enough to return to their duties, they were ordered to go back by the uniformed personnel and very often countermanded my medical opinion. And the others, I can't tell you, because at that point in time I became ill myself, so I didn't have the opportunity to follow them through.
One of the airmen who returned from the Gulf was so ill that Vivian remained with him on a 24-hour basis after he was refused admission to a local hospital.
Well, I suddenly collapsed and I just had uncontrollable diarrhoea and vomiting and dreadfully breathless. I really thought I was going to die. I felt so ill. They took me into the medical centre. I do remember that I was in excruciating chest pain and really feeling absolutely dreadful. And they dialed 3 9s and took me to the nearest hospital, where I then understand that I went in through casualty and ended up in intensive care, and they sent for my parents.
Why do you think they sent for your parents?
Because they didn't think I was going to make it, basically. I can't work because I never know how I'm going to be from day to day. One day I can feel reasonably well compared to previous days, and some days I just don't know how to get out the bed. I still get quite frequent but intermittent severe chest pain, and I keep breaking out in all these sores. I've been covered in them, all my mouth, inside my mouth, up my nose, on the rest of my body, in my genitalia, and they come up like in my mouth and in my genitalia like huge ulcers.
Since Vivian became sick, she's had no help from the military, despite the fact that she contracted her illness while on duty at the RAF base. She believes she caught it from the returning airmen, or from illegally imported dead wild cats sent back from the Gulf. Some of those who handled the cats were reporting flu-like symptoms.
I was threatened by the uniformed personnel on my base and from command headquarters that if I opened my mouth to anybody about what was wrong with me, they would ensure that I never worked again as a doctor. Another time I picked up the phone and I was told, don't you dare breathe a word to anybody about what has been happening on the base. And I said, who's speaking? Who is this? You don't need to know. Just keep your mouth shut. I am prepared to stand up now and be counted because I know that I'm not totally alone. But at the same token, with all the threats that I've received, basically to keep my mouth shut and not breathe a word to anybody, makes me think even more now that they're hiding something and they won't admit it. Well, why not? What are they hiding? What are they frightened of? They've sure as hell frightened the life out of me.
The British forces pride themselves on their mental and physical standards. But however fit they are, some troops have a stress reaction to warfare. This is classified as post-traumatic stress disorder, a recognised psychiatric condition.
If I go for a medical and it's a military doctor, I say it's not our problem. There's something matter in yourself. You've always been like this, it's always you. That's what they'll say. They'll say, no, you're just jumping on the bandwagon. That's what they'll say. I know what army doctors are like.
When he returned from the Gulf, Robert was suffering from suicidal depression. He was told to decide if he wanted to stay in the army. He left.
After I get out of the army, after about 6 months, I was getting more and more bad-tempered. I actually had a fight with my mum and dad and actually put my head through a glass window just for no reason. I just snapped like that and actually braided my mum and dad, which is something I would never do. And I just snapped, and that's when I noticed that was something the matter. And I've tried to commit suicide a few times. Just Elizabeth think can just set it off, and I'll just get in a right bad depression, start crying for no reason, or I'll get angry.
I was evacuated as a psychiatric casualty, as battle shock, as an acute stress reaction, as the army call it. Because of the severe chest pains and things I had as well, they put it all down to an anxiety attack. And I would put down a lot of it to, to the fact that I was very nervous. I was very upset at the feeling of having the respirator on when I was feeling so sick. But it was afterwards I thought that there had to be more to it than that. And I thought there must have been something else wrong with me to cause such an extreme reaction.
Research into illnesses suffered by farmers using sheep dip has shown that exposure to organophosphates can cause damage to the nervous system. Many symptoms experienced by Gulf War sufferers are similar to those reported by farmers using sheep dip.
There is considerable reluctance amongst psychiatrists and other physicians to recognise psychiatric disorder in association with organophosphates. But I have a number of patients now who I feel certain have suffered long-term disorder following major exposure events. For the most part, the patients I see show symptoms of anxiety and indeed panic attacks. Others present with explosive outbursts of rage.
I think the personality changes was the worst one. There was a lot of things that I've thought afterwards. I thought, why did I do this? I caused a lot of problems to my family. My family have been through a lot as a result of this. It did cause a family breakup.
I think we need a very comprehensive and widespread education of the medical body about these illnesses, diseases, which relates to toxic substances.
The area of the nervous system which is most affected by exposure to certain toxic substances cannot be measured by conventional methods. Using pioneering techniques, Dr. Jamal has shown that exposure to chemicals can have a measurable physical effect.
In these cases, in these suspected cases, you have really to apply a very comprehensive, complementary set of investigations of the peripheral nerve to be able to diagnose every single case.
The troops were bombarded with toxics in the desert. They were up against battle debris of rotting carcasses. The acrid smoke from the burning oil wells lasted for weeks. Decaying rubbish was treated and then burned, giving off choking gases. The pesticides sprayed on the prisoners of war included the powerful organophosphate malathion. Depleted uranium bullets were used for the first time in warfare, giving off low-level radioactivity and a heavy metal dust on explosion. Such a chemical overload now seems highly significant in the physical illnesses the troops are suffering.
As far as they're concerned, we're all mental cases. Unfortunately, because they have adopted that stance, then a lot of the hospitals have obviously not got any clout to go further.
One doctor in the US has had some success in treating Gulf War sufferers. 8 soldiers, 4 wives and 2 children have been helped by his treatment, based on 30 years' research into the bacteria present in urine.
They had an indigenous strain of an otherwise common bacterium, not really known to the immune system of the troops that went over there.
We took Dr. Lane to Dr. Hyman to see if he was able to diagnose and treat her illness. While many of the troops believed the drugs they took and the exposure in the Gulf made them sick, Dr. Lane never left England. Her only contact with the Gulf War was in treating the airmen at the base.
Before she came, she sent 2 specimens of urine, which are very much the same thing. She has germs in it in great numbers. The germs are cocci. There are a handful of them which appear viable, and perhaps I'll be able to grow those out. but there's a huge number, millions and millions of them, which are dead and decayed. This is quite compatible with the symptoms that she presents. In her, it's primarily weakness and fatigue, and rather profound for a person who has been an athlete.
Once diagnosed, Dr. Lane spent 3 weeks in hospital on an intravenous drip of antibiotics. Dr. Hyman was granted $2.2 million by Congress to continue to treat the sickness. Many sufferers are anxious to have the treatment, but until the funding goes through, his hands are tied.
She probably had an exposure comparable to the families of the returning veterans here. And of course, the thing that bothers me is that we're closing in on 4 years after the exposure, and many of the lesions are becoming irreversible. That as you let this disease progress, some will stabilize and do pretty well. Others will have progressive disease with permanent damage. And what starts out as an inflammatory process, let's say in the lung, which temporarily blocks the oxygen transfer, a year later, scar tissue which permanently blocks the oxygen transfer. And we're almost finished 4 years. And I think that's wrong. I know that when I was discharged, a veteran was an honored person. And now I'm beginning to think they're discards like used beer cans.
Back in the UK, the only medical research being done into the Gulf War is at Porton Down, the government's chemical and biological defence establishment. It has the status of a special health authority and is accountable only to itself and the MOD. The unprecedented cocktail of drugs the troops took were developed there, and research into their effects remains classified. The numbers of injections and tablets they were given to protect them included plague and an anthrax vaccine, which was given with an adjuvant vaccine of whooping cough to increase its effectiveness. One soldier reported being given 27 injections before he left England. Last year, we interviewed Robert Lake, who had collapsed and stopped breathing after being given the anthrax vaccine. He is now so sick that his parents take care of him. He is one of a group of soldiers currently suing the Ministry of Defence.
At the moment, I'm failing quite quickly. I'm eating, at the moment, 300 calories a day, and that will not get me through the next 6 months. I need some help. I need to get back on there. I need some form of funding by them so I can get back onto this treatment, so I can get my weight back up and get myself walking again properly and get some muscle put back on my body and some health, some form of healthy life formed again. I mean, a court case will be fine. I mean, that can take 2 or 3 years to come through. But if I carry on the way I'm going now, I won't be here for that.
Prior to having this adjuvant vaccine, he was perfectly okay, and within 2 or 3 minutes of having the vaccine, he was lying down on the floor, unable to breathe. And from that moment in time, he was ill.
Other people have gone to MOD on my behalf, and they refused to comment about my case at all. And from the diagnosis I had from Dr. Mansfield, plus what I've found since then, I believe the combination of pyrrolidine bromide and the vaccinations has caused a severe reaction in my body.
Clear codes of practice exist when administering vaccines and drugs. The Ministry of Defence contravene these codes.
The legal basis is that they're supposed to be told. They can be told as a group, and questions can be answered. But basically, you have to look at the individual's medical records and say, is there anything in this person's medical records which would make me not want to give this person the drugs, or this cocktail of drugs that I'm going to give them. And you would also give them sufficient information so that they would understand the risk that they were running by subjecting themselves, by dropping their drawers and bending over and taking the cocktail of drugs. They have to understand what risk it is they run.
We had no choice whatsoever. We were ordered to. They said, either have the injection or face the consequences.
If we had had a choice, I wasn't aware of having a choice. You didn't have to give signed permission. You were taken up in platoons and you were all injected. There was never any issue as to whether you want to be or not.
So we used to queue up and get injections all over the place. What's that, like basically a pincushion? I mean, whooping cough. I couldn't understand why. We weren't explained why we were having a whooping cough, bubonic plague, anthrax, naps. We were given all these, but we weren't told exactly why or what sort of things. If we didn't have them taken, what would happen to us? We just got told nothing. Just report you, you're getting an injection.
The Ministry of Defence maintained that all the soldiers gave their informed consent before agreeing to be injected. Every drug sold on the open market is issued with a product licence from the Medicines Control Agency. During the Gulf War, the MOD used unlicensed drugs on its troops. The nerve tablets and the plague vaccine should only have been used on a named patient-doctor basis.
You set up what are known as trials, and you set up named doctors who are specifically trained in relation to that drug and the effects that are known about that drug from the previous experimentation. And they then give it to patients who are given informed consent. Those people are told how, what the effects of this might be and what the possible benefits of this new untested drug might be. And those are named patients and named doctors, and everybody is fully informed. What we have here in relation to the Gulf War is something completely different. What we have is no named doctor and no named patient, but we do have a named drug which is handed out willy-nilly with no real information being given to the soldiers about the chemicals that they're being put into their body.
Originally, we were advised to have it, and so few people have gone forward. It came out in station routine orders that disciplinary action would be taken against people who didn't have the anthrax and plague jabs.
Naps tablets, things like that. We never got briefed on anything like that, you know, what we were actually being given, you know. But like myself, when I served in the Gulf, I seen side effects and naps was having on guys, you know, and what it was doing to people's minds, you know, making guys aggressive. Some guys, it was putting them on a high, you know. It was just sending some blokes nutty.
During the Persian Gulf War, hundreds of thousands of soldiers were given experimental vaccines and drugs, and today we will hear evidence that these medical products could be causing many of the so-called mysterious illnesses.
Senator Rockefeller's hearing in the States highlighted doubts about the safety of the nerve tablets or naps. The active ingredient in them is pyridostigmine bromide.
Like your problems could not possibly have been caused by the stress of being on that scene and location at the time, isn't that right?
Well, sir, I was in the Gulf for exactly 11 days, and the only thing that I took was pyridostigmine bromide. I never saw a fire. I never saw any missiles. I never fired any nuclear rounds. I didn't do any of that stuff. And the symptoms that I have are just from taking that drug. I firmly believe it.
You're playing around with people's lives, and you see you can order those people, because you're the Department of Defense, you can order those people to go to war. You can order them to go this direction rather than that direction. You can say, take this pill. And it's unlike private life. They have to do it. Yes, sir. In goes the pill. And so the soldier, the human being, is at the complete command and mercy of something called the Department of Defense. So it seems to me they have an ethical responsibility, and they certainly have the resources, and they certainly have the time to do their work very carefully and very well. But what they did instead was to take very small tests on very few people, and there were some quite disastrous results from those tests, which they then ignored, and then proceeded to administer these vaccines and pills to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of American soldiers, men and women. It was not impressive.
The Rockefeller hearing exposed the minimal testing the nerve tablets had in the US before all the troops were issued with them. The Department of Defense studies show that one person stopped breathing, another lost consciousness, and some had abnormal liver tests. A US scientist found that the toxicity of a common pesticide, DEET, used in the Gulf to kill sandflies, increased dramatically when combined with the nerve tablets. The nerve tablets the troops took remained unlicensed throughout the war. The MOD then applied for and received a licence to use them as a protection against nerve agent. These nerve tablets were not entered on troops' medical records. The government admit that no central records were kept of any drugs and vaccines given, and that whatever information they do have remains classified.
I know lots of people who've had their inoculation record cards taken off them on the return from the Gulf. And according to their medical records, they never had these injections.
When I first wrote off, I got a letter back saying that there had been a fire where medical records are stored and that it would take some months before they could become available. So now we're trying again through my doctor and just see what happens, still waiting.
All inquiries have to be taken through the MOD in London, and to date my solicitor has sent a third reminder to the MOD asking for medical details, and he hasn't received a reply to it at all.
Mark Stevens has experience of the MOD withholding vital evidence. He took them on over the friendly fire incident, where US pilots mistakenly killed British troops. He won the case.
The problem we have is created as a defect of British law. The information which will enable these soldiers to successfully pursue their claims is all in the hands of the MOD, and is at the moment being treated as an official secret. And so until that information comes out, they are effectively barred from taking any effective claim. But of course in the future we're going to see information wash across the Atlantic from the cases which are very much further advanced over there. And we're going to see cases brought here based on that knowledge, and then the doors of the Ministry of Defence are going to be flung open wide.
In Washington, a press release from the Czech Ministry of Defence confirming readings of the deadly nerve agent sarin contradicted the Allies' position that nerve agents were never used.
On more than 3 or 4 occasions, the Czechs detected live agent chemicals, which was unusual in that area. And of course, what we were concerned with after that is what was the source of the chemicals? Where did they come from? Did they come from the bombings that we did? We did, and the British did with us, and the French, of the storage facilities that Saddam Hussein had? Or were they chemicals in the area that maybe some of our troops had? That question has not really been resolved.
On the 20th of January, I was on night shift with a team of 11 people when a Scud was intercepted overhead at Dhahran by a Patriot. The warhead landed on Dhahran airfield, and within seconds, every can and every NIAD within the local area was blasting off. One of the lads went forward and carried out what we call a residual vapour detector test. It's a small puffer bottle with a detector disc on it. It turned out positive, so he gave the alarm. People then got into NBC kit, and 2 further RVDs were carried out. Both came out positive.
On January the 20th, we were all asleep. It was early in the morning, and there was a huge explosion took place over the camp. And it woke everybody up. And immediately the alarm went off, and they announced over the PA system to go to Mach 4, which is full chemical gear. And when I got to the bunker, my skin was on fire.
About 2:30 in the morning on the 20th, no warning whatsoever, there was 2 enormous bangs above our head, and there was just sheer panic. There were soldiers running all over the place, and then there was an RMP major, or an RCT mover, came along with a handheld calm and said, stay under cover. Do not get your NBC kit off yet. It says, we have been hit by a chemical agent.
The West knew the potential for a chemical and biological attack from Saddam Hussein. They had sold most of the chemical precursors and biotoxins to Iraq in the first place. The MOD deny that the UK forces were exposed to any chemical attack and claim that their chemical detection equipment was registering false alarms.
They put us into NBC Black, which is full alert, for 20 minutes. Told us the NIADs and cams had only gone off because aircraft were taken off and it was unburned fuel. Yet 20 minutes later, with no further attack, they put us back into NBC Black for 8 hours. At no time did any aircraft taken off with unburned fuel set off the cams or the NIADs either before or after our incident.
In addition to going to visit the Czech Republic and meeting with us, I visit the United Kingdom along with members of my staff on the Armed Services Committee, and we met with the proper British authorities. And of course, the British authorities denied any exposure of the British troops. I believe it was over 40,000 troops there from the UK, that they had been exposed to any chemicals.
Since Terry Walker has been investigating his case, he has regularly had his post opened. When his affidavit on the Scud attack was returned to him, 5 pages had been removed.
They sent me a copy and they said sign it and return it, so I signed the copy and I returned it the same day, and a week or two later I received a draft copy of my statement, but when I did actually receive it, the envelope had been opened. As you go down the page, it goes on to the night of the 20th of January, when we had a missile attack at Al Jabal at the docks. And if you turn over from page 4 to page 5, it's missing. And it's all the details about the 20th of January.
I haven't been able to eat. I mean, I eat, but as soon as I eat, I have the diarrhea. I mean, 10 minutes after I eat, I'm gone to the bathroom. I've had a lot of back problems that I haven't had before. When I brush my teeth, my gums bleed, which never happened before.
Bill Dalton bagged up bodies during the war. He put his Gulf War photographs on video.
Same with this. The face is all blisters. We was explained all the different kind of bombs and the way they exploded, and the type of smoke cloud that would come up from them. And some that's on the tape is, they're the mushroom, which indicates chemicals. And we were close enough to those where it would have effect on us if they were chemicals.
We were told we'd handle contaminated remains. And me and another person in the section questioned as to what they would be contaminated with. We were told mustard gas and nerve agent gas. And we did do mass burials for Iraqis, and we were told that they were contaminated.
If it was the cluster bombs that went off that killed them, then the clothes would be burned too. If it was the propane bombs, the clothing would be burned also. But this is just pictures of the flesh burned or blistered, and the clothing isn't hurt, not burned, anything. So that's evidence that there's some kind of chemical there.
You can see that the bodies were burned, but the clothes weren't. You can see blisters on them, so you can only assume that that's a chemical, especially blisters, especially burns. You know, so we questioned that, and we were told not to discuss it with any other people, that they were contaminated, and it was left at that.
When these were going off, it was usually in the major battles, and it could have come from either side. But a lot of people that I worked with that went to the docks and unloaded vehicles and stuff like that said that there was chemicals on the trucks that they unloaded.
They put me on bed rest for 2 weeks for chest pains and dizziness, and they blamed it on fatigue, but I don't believe that was the chest pains because our alarms went off. My section sergeant really was scared. I told him, I said, my nose was running, I had a headache, my muscles were twitching, Gibson's muscles were twitching, and I had chest pains. They called the air vac, the medevac, and shipped me out. And that's when they all went to MOP level 4, and they said, oh, it's just, you know, fatigue. She's just stressed out. She's exhausted.
Selena Nelson is still extremely sick. She needs intense medical care, and her future remains uncertain.
Dr. Lane is doing very well. Of the objective findings, her chronic pharyngitis, the chronic sore throat, that's not exudative, has cleared completely. Her skin lesions have cleared. Laboratory-wise, she's had a dramatic recovery. It's been my experience that that is almost always followed by clinical improvement.
You're a hard taskmaster. If the peripheral nerves are damaged, there's no guarantee that you'll ever be able to do anything. But I'm willing to try. So it's trying to build back some of the muscles that I've lost by general exercises that I've been given to do, and also try to rebuild back some of my stamina because that had just gone out the window. I'm not a person that gives in, not with anything, but this was a total nightmare, absolute nightmare. And it's like trying to claw your way up a very steep, slippery slope, and you think you're getting somewhere, and then suddenly you'll have a really off day again and you're just back in the bottom. And the fact that nobody believes you, that's really what gets you. And they all try to say, oh yes, mental or post-traumatic distress syndrome. I haven't got post-traumatic distress syndrome. I've dealt with people with that. I know what it is. And I know I haven't got it. Mine is a physical illness, which of course we've now proved.
2,500 Canadian troops served in the Gulf and took the same drugs and vaccines as the British and the Americans. They are now reporting sick and are being ignored.
Been in existence for about 3 weeks, and we have already over 50 veterans that have called us, including one British soldier now living in Canada. And they're all showing signs of and symptoms of Gulf War syndrome. Military basically said it was all in their heads. There's no relation to the Gulf War. They're denying it. They're saying there's nothing wrong with the pyridostigmine bromide pills we took. There was no chemical agents present in the Gulf yet. If you look at the American reports, they've admitted, saying yes, there was sarin or traces of sarin and mustard gas found in Al Jubal, Saudi Arabia. And on my release form, they also said I was only exposed to inhalation of crude oil burning for 1 day. Now, we all know the oil wells were burning for longer than 1 day. So they're basically stonewalling us, saying there's nothing wrong with us. Yet, they're releasing us left, right, and center, and not recognizing our symptoms, nor giving us a pension, nor medical care, nothing. Right now, I can't work because I'm sick at least 3 days out of a week. I can't get any unemployment benefits because I'm not able to look for a job. And they just basically kicked us out, shut the door on us.
We've been receiving a lot of reports of cancers, also of growths that have developed in different parts of the body that once they're removed and are determined to be benign, continue to grow back. One particular veteran has had 51 growths removed.
It took 15 years for US veterans to link their cancer and birth defects with exposure to Agent Orange, a chemical defoliant used in the Vietnam War. Vivian Lane continues to follow Dr. Hyman's treatment back in England. She's determined to practice as a doctor again. Since she returned, Dr. Hyman has heard the Pentagon has vetoed Congress's grant of $2.2 million for his treatment. While US veterans are suing the chemical companies that supplied biotoxins and chemicals to Iraq, 500 British Gulf War veterans are suing the MOD for negligence. Without legal aid, individuals face costs of thousands of pounds they don't have.
Right to your own members of parliament as well.
Are they trying to get rid of the old to bring in the new?
With no British government interest, charities are funding the only investigative research being conducted into the sickness. Dr. Jamal will conduct a preliminary study to assess the damage done to the troops' central and peripheral nervous systems. Nearly 4 years after the war, the troops are angry that the MOD refuses to accept Gulf War sickness as an illness. How many more sick soldiers will it take before the British government are forced to admit it and initiate its own inquiry?
When a soldier joins the army, obviously he's expected some stage in his career to go to war or serve in the likes of Northern Ireland, which I've already done. But what he doesn't expect is when he goes to war, is to be hit with some forms of chemical or probably lethal injections or vaccines which have never been tested. You know, this is the things that he doesn't expect to happen to him. Because if that was the case, we wouldn't have an army, because if the enemy didn't finish her off, well, surely the government would with all these stuff they're giving me.
I just feel like I've been fobbed off. I don't feel like I've had any answers given to me at all.
and I've basically been told I'm not going to get any. I was told my daughter's progressing wonderfully. She's doing better than anybody could ever expect, so why don't I leave it? And for me, that's just not good enough. I mean, my daughter is going to want to know why.